If one type of person can ruin your mood for hours, the intensity itself may be part of the clue. Maybe it is the colleague who speaks with effortless confidence, the friend who always needs reassurance, the family member who says no without explaining, or the person online who seems almost shameless about wanting attention. You may have good reasons to dislike what they do, but sometimes the reaction becomes larger than the moment. You replay it. You argue with them in your head. You keep noticing them long after they are gone. Carl Jung's psychology offers an uncomfortable possibility. The people who disturb you most may sometimes be showing you something you have worked very hard not to see in yourself, not because you are secretly identical to them, and not because every strong reaction is projection. The more useful question is this: why does this particular quality have so much power over you? Ordinary dislike usually has a proportion. Someone interrupts you, you feel irritated, and the moment passes. Someone behaves selfishly, you decide you do not trust them, and you adjust accordingly. But some reactions do not pass. They acquire psychological weight. A confident coworker speaks in a meeting, and you immediately read arrogance into the way they sit, the way they phrase an idea, even the way other people listen to them. Later, you are still thinking about it. You may tell yourself that you simply dislike arrogant people. That may be true, but the intensity asks a second question. Why this person? Why this trait? Why does it stay with you? Or imagine a friend who constantly asks whether everything is okay between you. Their need for reassurance genuinely exhausts you. Yet perhaps what enrages you is not only the repetition. Maybe dependence itself feels intolerable to you. Maybe you build an identity around never needing anyone, never asking twice, never appearing uncertain. Then there's a family member who can say, "No, I can't do that," and continue eating dinner without producing a 10-minute explanation. You call them selfish. Maybe sometimes they are, but you also notice something else. Their refusal bothers you more than it seems to bother anyone else. The point is not to distrust your judgment. The point is to become curious when judgment carries an unusual emotional charge, because a disproportionate reaction can contain two pieces of information at once. It can tell you something about the other person and something about the structure of your own personality. This is where Jung becomes useful. In Jung's model, the conscious personality is not the whole personality. We develop an image of who we are, what kind of person we are allowed to be, and which qualities belong outside that image. The qualities that do not fit neatly into the conscious identity do not simply disappear. Jung used the idea of the shadow for aspects of personality that remain unrecognized, rejected, or insufficiently lived. The shadow is often misunderstood as a hidden collection of evil impulses. It can include destructive qualities, but it can also contain ordinary human capacities that your preferred identity has no room for: assertiveness, ambition, dependence, anger, visibility, vulnerability, even playfulness. Projection is one way unconscious material can become psychologically visible. Instead of recognizing quality as part of our own possible range, we experience it with unusual force in someone else. That does not mean the quality is imaginary. A boastful person may actually be boastful. A manipulative person may actually be manipulative. A cruel act does not become acceptable because projection exists. The Jungian question begins somewhere more precise. What belongs to them, and what is your reaction adding? Suppose you were rewarded for being modest. You learn not to take up too much space, not to talk about your achievements, not to appear impressed with yourself. Over time, modesty may stop being a behavior and become part of your moral identity. Then you meet someone who promotes their work openly. They speak about their success without apology. Something in you tightens. You may accurately notice that they enjoy attention, but the emotional heat may also come from a capacity you have forbidden in yourself. The capacity to be visible. The projection is not, "I am secretly exactly like them." It may be, "They are living a quality I have pushed so far outside my identity that I can only experience it as theirs." This is why the people who trigger us are not always people who resemble us. Sometimes they represent the opposite of the role we have spent years maintaining. If your identity is built around being agreeable, blunt people may feel almost morally offensive. If your identity is built around self-control, emotionally expressive people may seem weak, dramatic, or embarrassing. If you learn to be invisible, Someone who enjoys attention can appear unbearable. If you learn never to depend on anyone, another person's need can feel less like a request and more like a violation. And if you learn to doubt yourself before speaking, visible confidence may look suspicious even when it is earned. Notice what happens here. The conscious personality says, I am not like that. The stronger the identity becomes, the more important the opposite can become psychologically. Consider the person who always describes themselves as easygoing. They rarely argue. They accommodate. They are proud that they do not create problems. Then they meet someone who is direct about preferences. I don't like that restaurant. I need more notice. That doesn't work for me. The easygoing person may experience this as selfishness, but perhaps part of the irritation comes from witnessing a freedom they do not permit themselves. The other person can disappoint someone and remain intact. That possibility matters because resentment often gathers around capacities we disowned. You do not necessarily want to become the person who irritates you. You may want access to something they represent. When projection remains unconscious, it can distort relationships. You stop meeting the person in front of you and begin meeting the meaning they carry for you. A confident person becomes arrogance. A needy person becomes weakness. A private person becomes rejection. An ambitious person becomes vanity. A boundary becomes selfishness. Once it happens, your reaction can become strangely rigid because you are no longer responding only to present behavior. You are also defending an identity. Imagine that being the good person is central to how you understand yourself. You are helpful, patient, considerate. Then someone behaves selfishly. Healthy judgment might say, that choice affected me, and I do not accept it. But identity can add something else. I could never be that kind of person. That second sentence is psychologically expensive because every human being needs some capacity for self-interest. You need to protect time, choose one obligation over another, disappoint people, negotiate for yourself, and sometimes place your own priorities first. If all self-interest is exiled under the label selfishness, you do not become free of self-interest. You become less conscious of how it operates. It may return as resentment. You give, then silently keep score. You agree, then withdraw. You insist you do not mind, then feel unseen. The denied quality returns indirectly because the personality still needs a function it was trying to eliminate. Projection, therefore, has a double cost. It can make other people flatter and simpler than they are, and it can make you smaller than you need to be. This is a reversal that makes shadow work more difficult than simply identifying flaws. Sometimes the trait you condemn contains capacity you need, hidden inside an exaggerated form you genuinely do not want. Arrogance may contain confidence. Selfishness may contain self-protection. Attention-seeking may contain the willingness to be seen. Neediness may contain the ability to admit dependence. Anger may contain the power to say that something matters. The task is not imitation. If someone is cruel, integrating aggression does not mean becoming cruel. It may mean recovering the ability to confront. If someone dominates every room, integrating visibility does not mean dominating. It may mean allowing yourself to speak before you have guaranteed everyone's approval. If someone constantly demands reassurance, integrating need does not mean making another person responsible for your emotions. It may mean admitting that you sometimes want support instead of building your entire identity around needing nothing. This distinction matters because the conscious mind often creates false choices. Either I am kind or I am selfish. Either I am humble or I am arrogant. Either I am independent or I am weak. Either I am calm or I am angry. But psychological integration is not choosing the rejected extreme. It is recovering enough of the excluded capacity that you are no longer controlled by its absence. So what do you do with a trigger? Not every reaction requires analysis. Sometimes someone is simply unpleasant. Sometimes a boundary has been crossed. Sometimes your judgment is proportionate and useful. But when the same type of person repeatedly produces an outsized reaction, you can ask a more discriminating question. What quality does this person represent to me? Not, what terrible thing about myself am I refusing to admit? That question already assumes guilt. Instead, what human capacity have I associated with this trait? If confidence triggers you, ask what confidence means in your private moral vocabulary. Does it mean arrogance, risk, exposure, the possibility of being judged? If people who say no trigger you, ask what refusal means. Does it mean selfishness, disloyalty, rejection? What would become possible if refusal did not automatically mean any of those things? If visible need irritates you, ask what you had to believe about needing others. Were you allowed to ask? Did competence become part of how you earned respect? The goal is not to excuse the other person. It is to separate their behavior from the psychological material your reaction may be carrying. That separation gives you something projection takes away. Choice. You can decide that someone really is arrogant without treating confidence itself as dangerous. You can reject selfish behavior while admitting that your own life requires self-interest. You can dislike emotional dependence without turning every need in yourself into weakness. And you can recognize another person's flaws without requiring them to carry the parts of you that your identity refuses to own. That is a quieter form of inner authority. Your reactions still matter, but they no longer get the final word simply because they are intense. The next time someone produces a reaction that seems large in the moment, notice the trait before you judge the meaning. Ask yourself, what does this person seem allowed to be that I have worked very hard not to become? And then make the question more precise. Is there a useful human capacity hidden inside the version of that trait I reject? You do not have to become them. The point is to become less divided inside yourself. So which kind of person reliably changes your emotional state fastest? The arrogant person, the needy person, the selfish person, the angry person, or the person who seems completely unafraid of being seen? If you want to continue this thread, the next reflection explores the dark side of being too nice, and what happens when kindness becomes the only version of you that is allowed to exist.